Hey, how's it going, YouTube? Welcome to another story time of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. So, we are on chapter 6 from where we left off last time. In the last chapters, we had Edmund introduced. He was becoming a captain of the new ship. The old captain died. Uh, he was about to get married to his beloved Mercedes. They were just about to have a party to celebrate the union, or at least the revelation of the union, and he is arrested. So they have a lot of like enemies that are plotting against him within these chapters. Now their plans are coming to fruition, and in the last chapter we had a new uh, character introduced, the deputy procureur du roi. So the deputy procureur du roi is somebody that was also attending a wedding at the same time as well, and is called in because the judges are out of the country or city. I think it's just country. Yeah, yeah, because I think they said they went to France or something along those lines. But this is chapter 6, the examination. Ooh, so this is going to be a trial. Villefort had no sooner left the room than he discarded his gaudy manner and assumed the grave air of a man called upon to decide upon the life of his fellow man. In reality, however, apart from the line of politics which his father had adopted, and which might influence his future if he did not separate himself altogether from him, Gerald de Villefort was at this moment as happy as it was given to any man to be. Already rich, and although only 27 years of age, accompanying a high position on the bench, he was about to marry a young and beautiful girl whom he loved, not passionately, it is true, but the calculation as befits a future procureur de roi. For in addition to her beauty, which was remarkable, Mademoiselle de Saint Méran, his betrothed, belonged to one of the most influential families of the period, and furthermore had a dowry of 50,000 crowns, besides the prospect of inheriting another 500,000. At the door, he met the commissary of police, who was waiting for him. The sight of this man brought him from his seventh heaven down to earth. He composed his face and, advancing towards the officer, said, "Here I am, monsieur. I have read the letter. You were quite right in arresting this man. Now give me all the information you have discovered about him and the conspiracy." "As yet, we know nothing of the conspiracy, monsieur. All the papers found on the man have been sealed and placed on your desk. You have seen but the letter denouncing him that the prisoner is a certain Edmond Dantes, first mate of Three Masters Ferron, trading in cotton with Alexandria and Smyrna, and belonging to Morel and son of Marcel. Did he serve in the navy before he joined the mercantile marine?" "Oh no, monsieur, he is too young. He is only 19 or 20 at most." At this moment, just as Villefort had arrived at the corner of the Rue des Conciles, a man who seemed to be waiting for him approached. It was M. Morel. "Ah, Monsieur de Villefort," he cried, "I am very fortunate in meeting you. A most extraordinary and unaccountable mistake has been made. The mate of my ship, a certain Edmond Dantes, has just been arrested." "I know," Villefort made answer, "and I am on my way to examine him." "Oh, monsieur," M. Morel continued, carried away by his friendship for the young man, "you do not know the accursed, but I do. He is the gentlest, most trustworthy man imaginable, and I don't hesitate to say he is the best seaman in the whole mercantile service. Oh, Monsieur de Villefort, with all my heart I can commend him to your kindly consideration. You may rest assured, monsieur, that you will not have appealed to me in vain if the prisoner is innocent. But if, on the contrary, he is guilty, we live in a difficult age, monsieur, when it would be a fatal thing to be lenient. In that case, I shall be compelled to do my duty. As he had just arrived at his own house beside the law courts, he entered with a lordly air, after having saluted with icy politeness and unhappy ship owners who stood petrified on the spot where Villefort had left him. The antechamber was full of gendarmes and policemen, and in their midst stood the prisoner, carefully guarded. Villefort crossed the room, threw a glance at Dantes, and, after taking a packet of paper from one of the gendarmes, disappeared. His first impression of the young man was favorable, but he had been warned so often against trusting first impulses, and he applied the maxim to the term impression, forgetting the difference between the two words. He therefore stifled the feelings of pity and uppermost in his heart, assumed the expression which he reserved for important occasions, and sat down at his desk with a frown on his brow. Bring in the prisoner. An instant later, Dantes was before him, saluting his judge with an uneasy politeness. He looked round for a seat as if he were in M. Morel's drawing room. "Who are you, and what is your name?" asked Villefort, as he fingered the papers which he received from the police officer on his entry. "My name is Edmond Dantes," replied the young man calmly. "I am mate of the Pharaon owned by Mercier Morel and Son." "Your age?" continued Villefort. 19. "What were you doing when you were arrested?" "I was at my betrothal breakfast, monsieur," the young man said, and his voice trembled slightly as he thought of the contrast between those happy moments and the painful ordeal he was now undergoing. "You were at your betrothal feast," the deputy said, shuddering in spite of him. "Yes, monsieur, I am about to marry a woman I have loved for 3 years." Villefort, impassive though he usually was struck with this coincidence. Coincidence? And passionate voice of Dante's, who had been seized in the midst of his happiness, touched a sympathetic chord in his own heart. He also was about to be married. Also was happy, and his happiness had been interrupted in order that he might kill the happiness of another. "Now, I want all the information in your possession," he said. "Have you served under the usurper?" "I was about to be drafted into the Marines when he fell." "I have been told you have extreme political views," said Villefort, who had never been told anything of the kind, but was not sorry to put forward the statement in the form of an accusation. "Extreme political views, monsieur? Alas, I am almost ashamed to say it, but I have never had what one calls a view. I'm barely 19 years of age, and I have already had the honor to tell you. I know nothing, and for I am not destined to play any great role in life. The little I am, and ever shall be, if I am given the position I desire, I owe to Monsieur Morel. My opinions, I do not say political, but private, are limited to these three sentiments. I love my father, I respect Monsieur Morel, and I adore Mercedes. That, monsieur, is all I have to tell you." You see for yourself that it is not very interesting. As Dante spoke, Villefort looked at his genial and frank countenance, and with his experience of crime and criminals, he recognized that every word Dante spoke convinced him of his innocence. In spite of Villefort's severity, Edmund had not once expressed in his looks, his words, or his gestures anything but kindness and respect for his interrogator. This is indeed a charming young man, Villefort said to himself, but aloud he said, "Have you any enemies?" "Enemies, monsieur. My position is happily not important enough to make any enemies. As regards my character, I perhaps too hasty, but I always try to curb my temper in my dealings with my subordinates. I've 10 or 12 sailors under me. If you ask them, monsieur, you will find that they love and respect me, not as a father, for I'm too young, but as an elder brother. Perhaps you have no enemies, but you may have aroused feelings of jealousy. At the early age of 19, you are about to receive the captaincy. You are about to marry a beautiful girl who loves you. These two pieces of good fortune may have been the cause of envy. You are right. No doubt you understand men better than I do, and possibly it is so. But if any of my friends cherish any such envious feelings towards me, I would rather not know lest my friendship should turn into hatred. You are wrong. You should always strive to see clearly around you, and indeed, you seem such a worthy young man that I am going to depart from the ordinary rules by showing you the denunciation which has brought you before me. Here is the paper. Do you recognize the writing? So saying, Villefort took the letter from his pocket and handed it to Dantes. Dantes looked at it and read it. His brow darkened as he said, "No, monsieur, I do not know this writing. It is disguised, and yet it is very plainly written. At any rate, it is a clever hand that wrote it. I am very lucky," he continued, looking at Villefort with an expression of gratitude, "in having you to examine me, for there can be no doubt that this envious person is indeed my enemy." And the light that shone in the young man's eyes as he said this revealed to Villefort how much energy and deep feeling lay concealed beneath his apparent gentleness. "Very well, then," said the deputy. "Answer me quite frankly, not as a prisoner before his judge, but as a man in false position to another man who has his interest at heart. What truth is there in this anonymous accusation?" "It is partly true and partly false, monsieur. Here is the plain truth. I hear it by my honor as a sailor, by my love for Mercedes, and by my father's life. When we left Naples, Captain Leclerc fell ill of brain fever, as he had no doctor on board, and as he would not put in any port, since he was very anxious to reach Elba. He became so very ill that towards the end of the third day, feeling that he was dying, he called me to him. 'My dear Dantes,' he said, 'swear to me on your honor that you will do what I bid you, for it is a matter of the utmost importance.' 'I swear, Captain,' I said. 'After my death, the command of the ship devolves upon you as mate. Take command, head for the Isle of Elba, go ashore at Port Ferrangio, ask for the marshal, and give him this letter. You may be given another letter to be entrusted with a mission. That mission was to have been mine, Dante's, but you will carry it out in my seat and get it all the glory of it. I shall carry out your instructions, Captain, but perhaps I shall not be admitted into the Marshal's presence as easily as you think. Here is a ring which will give you admittance and remove all difficulties." He then gave me a ring. It was only just in time. 2 hours later, he was delirious, and the next day he died. What did you do then? What I was bound to do, and what everyone would have done in my place. In any circumstances, the request of a dying man is sacred, but with a sailor, a superior's request is an order that has to be carried out. So I headed for Elba, where I arrived the next day. I gave orders for everyone to remain on board while I went ashore alone. The ring gained admittance for me to the marshal's presence. He asked me about poor Captain Leclerc's death and gave me a letter which he charged me to deliver in person at an address in Paris. I gave him my promise in accordance with the last request of my captain. I landed here, rapidly settled all the ship's business, and hastened to my betrothed, whom I found more beautiful and loving than ever. Finally, monsieur, I was partaking of my betrothal breakfast, was to have been married in an hour, and was counting on going to Paris tomorrow, when owing to this denunciation, which you seem to treat as lightly as I do, I was arrested. I believe you have told me the truth, was Villafort's answer. And if you have been guilty, it is through imprudence. An imprudence justified by your captain's order. Hand me the letter that was given to you at Elba. Give me your word of honor that you will appear directly you are summoned to do so, and you may rejoin your friends. I am free, monsieur, Dantes cried out, overcome with joy. Certainly, but first give me the letter. It must be in front of you, monsieur. It was taken along with my other papers, and I recognize some of them in that bundle. Wait a moment, the deputy said as Dantes was taking his hat and glove. To whom was it addressed? To Monsieur Noirtier, Rue Cour Heron, Paris. These words fell on Villafort's ears with the rapidity and unexpectedness of a thunderbolt. He sank into his chair from which he had risen to reach the packet letter of letters, drew the fatal letter from the bundle, and glanced over it with a look of inexpressible terror. Monsieur Noirtier, Rue Couheron, number 13, he murmured, growing paler and paler. Have you shown this letter to anyone? To no one, monsieur, on my honor. Villefort's brow darkened more and more. When he had finished reading the letter, his head fell into his hands. He remained thus for a moment quite overcome. After a while, he composed himself and said, You say you do not know the contents of this letter. On my honor, monsieur, I am in complete ignorance of its contents. Dantes waited for the next question, but no question came. Villefort again sank into his chair, passed his hand over his brow dripping with perspiration, and read the letter for a third time. Oh, if he should know the contents of this letter, he murmured. And if he ever gets to know that Noirtier is the father of Villefort, I am lost, lost forever. Villefort made a violent effort to pull himself together and said in as steady a voice as possible, I cannot set you at liberty at once, as I had hoped. I must first consult the judge the instructions. I see how I have tried to help you, but I must detain you a prisoner for some time longer. I will make that time as short as possible. The principal charge against you has to do with this letter, and you see, Villefort went to the fire, threw the letter into the flames, and remained watching it until it was reduced to ashes. You see, he continued, I have destroyed it. Oh, monsieur, Dantes exclaimed, you are more than just, you are kindness itself. But listen, Villefort went on. After what I've done, you feel you can have confidence in me, don't you? I only wish to advise you I shall keep you here until this evening. Possibly. Someone else will come to examine you in the event. Repeat all that you have told me, but say not a word about this letter. I promise, monsieur. You understand, he continued. The letter is destroyed, and you and I alone know of its existence. Should you be questioned about it, firmly deny all knowledge of it, and you are saved. Villefort rang, and his commissary entered. The deputy whispered a few words into his ear, and the officer nodded in answer. Follow the commissary, Villefort said to Dantes. Dantes bowed and cast a look of gratitude at Villefort, and did as he was bid. The door was hardly closed when Villefort's strength failed him, and he sank half fainting into his chair. After a few moments, he muttered to himself, Alas, alas! If the Procureur de Rue had been here, if the Judge d'instruction had been called instead of me, I should have been lost. This little bit of paper would have spelt my ruin. Oh, Father, Father, will you always stand in the way of my happiness in this world? And must I eternally fight against your past? Suddenly, as Suddenly, an unexpected light appeared to flash across his mind, illuminating his whole face. A smile played around his drawn mouth, and his haggard eyes became fixed as though arrested by a thought. The very thing, he said. Yes, this letter, which was to have spelt my ruin, will probably make my fortune. Quick to work, Villefort. And after having assured himself that the prisoner had left the antechamber, the deputy hastened to the house of his betrothed. And that concludes chapter 6. Wow. Wow. What great piece of writing, right? That was so cool. I thought the trial was gonna be a little bit more boring, to read. Uh, but they made it so not necessarily like exciting, but like the conversation that's had between these two, the Procureur de Rue and Edmund, is so interesting. The exchanges they have are so passionate. They mirror themselves quite well as also where the procure comes from nobility, he comes from riches, he comes from a complete opposite of Edmund. Edmund supports his father as much as he can, whereas the procure uh, is haunted by the past of his father in many ways. And it's so interesting to see the dynamic between the two because they both don't have any grudges against each other. They're actually trying to help each other out in many ways, but they're both uh kind of victims of their circumstances in some manner. Man, I can't wait to read the next chapter. Holy moly. I really want to read it right now, but we're going to save it for tomorrow. Chapter 7, The Chateau d'If. I think I said that right. Diff? The Chateau d'If. Hey, Chateau d'If. All right. I'll see you guys all in the next one. If you're watching from YouTube, make sure you hit the like and subscribe. I'll see you all for chapter 7.